It was a wintry night. The sky was covered by the star-like flowers, the essence of death looming about. An immense explosion was heard from a nearby castle. Sound waves vibrated through the forest, creating an everlasting echo breaking the night's calm. A hooded man, the most likely perpetrator of such an event, ran through the woods into an open, snowy field. Desperation blinded him, enabling his profuse bleeding to drain faster. Wounded, and running out of time, his body began to fail him. It was not long before he started to fade. He had no choice but to stop, allowing him to take a few seconds to laugh at the situation he found himself in. Yet, his knees gave in. He knew his death was inevitable. He decided to lay his back on the snow, overlooking the night sky. The trees that surrounded the open field were now marked with ruby-like spots, signaling his location in the center of the snowy meadows. The enemy was not far behind him, and he had planned to die before anything could be extracted from him. I am out of time. Ah, this reminds me of her favorite color. I am so sorry. I would give anything to see you dance, uttered the man, as he slowly fell into a deep dream. In his mind, he danced away with a young blonde girl. In no time, the man's spirit was gone. His death vibrated through the dark forest, creating an everlasting echo of sadness. The stars felt colder. The wind rushed in from the east, indicating his misplaced path. Two dark figures approached the dead man. One of them proceeded to pick up a note from the man's left hand. Once they had what they came for, they vanished into the night. The note read, "The recurrence and investigation that one recommended." Meanwhile, in another forest far from the dead man's location, a battle was about to unfold. "Gorn, get us more time for the ritual," indicated a young pale and black-haired girl who wore a religious white robe. 5 youngsters stood still in the night. A sinister cloud began to take form, covering the stars above. Soon, the 5 became 7, and the 7 became 12. All 12 youngsters stood still, armed with their weapon of choice as death approached them, ever so slowly on that cold, lonely night. The knight held his sword and shield, the wizard his wand, the white mage her cross, the vampire his cane, the wolfman wore his moon pendant, the black mage a metal stave, the beast master the whip, and the marauder held his short swords. They were ready to give their lives for the greater good, along with others that arrived. The place seemed familiar and different by contrast. White fields surrounded by wicked tall trees that rested under a powerful crescent moon. The stars from above began to fade as darkness itself approached them. In time, the night became completely dark and overwhelmed the heroes with a sense of dread. A cold breath drew into the hollow forest of that dreadful, sinister night. In seconds, a dark, bright fire lit the skies above, and upon our heroes, it began to rain fire. The wizards cast a protective sphere around them. At the same time, the white mage began an incantation, taking to her knees on the cold, wet snow. She continued to mutter, very slowly, the words, "Corpus Repectus." The knight raised his shield and soared with great pride, only to yell onto the night, "Let us write our destiny. Tonight, we are heroes." The fire engulfed the protective shield cast by the wizards. In no time, the sphere that held Hell's door at bay fell apart. Soon, a dark, fire-like humanoid came forth with many other figures that seemed to surround the heroes. Red eyes surrounded the very edges of the dark forest. Hundreds became thousands. Thousands became millions of bloodshot eyes that pierced through our heroes' souls. The 12 soon became 7. One by one, each fell to the bombardment that came forth from the falling flames that engulfed them. All was lost until the knight lifted his shield and pointed his sword at the dark, fiery humanoid thing leading the attack. This was the very same entity that stood before them, casting an everlasting fire. Still, like a demon straight from hell, looking to cover them with its warm blanket of hellish death, it continued moving forward relentlessly, killing each of them. One by one, with no remorse, fire hellhounds came forth and attacked the wizards that fought valiantly, keeping them from casting spells in their defense. The very ground that our heroes stood upon was scorched and began to melt, breaking underneath their feet. It was clear to the knight they were destined to lose this battle. Flashes of spells hit dark, fiery demon hellhounds, exploding them as the heroes fought with all their might. Their battle was with great effort, but numbers were on the enemy's side. Gorn, please, make a portal back to town. Take them with you, yelled the knight, as a sheath of beady sweat lined down his forehead. His holy shield began to crack and melt its edges. The continuation of the flames that were being cast over the night was only increasing in intensity. Gorn, who was an expert wizardly vampire, reluctantly opened the portal, demanding all to flee through it. I will follow your wishes. Know that our contract binds me to do so. In any other situation, I would not retreat like a coward, spoke the tearful young Gorn. It was obvious what our vigilant knight was about to do. The white mage named Arcana decided to stay, refusing to leave through the portal. She continued to whisper, Corpus Repellus, as her beautiful figure and black hair were burned by the flames. In time, she went from light brown skin to gray pale skin, resembling a victim from Pompeii. It was evident that she was dead, but even at death, you could still hear her speaking those words, Corpus Repellus. The knight now stood alone, still holding his shield, ready to die. The dark entity muttered in a sinister voice, Grievous, knight of all knights, why don't you join my cause? Your death could be avoided. Only those that refuse the cleansing will die. The new world is here. Upon the entity finishing its sentence, the great knight smiled without a care for the spoken words. Come, finish what you started, Oath Brother. You betrayed the council. What's the worth you paid for the death of your own? Announced Grievous, the knight, as he taunted the entity to bring itself closer to his reach. The dark fiery entity was enticed by this. In effect, it was drawn closer to Grievous. The waves of emotions in his heart began to beat to the rhythm of sorrow, despair, and melancholy. The dark humanoid figure stood right in front of him, sucking every glimmer of hope that dared to come close to it, creating death. Even the ground on which it walked turned gray, signaling the death of the earth itself. At that precise moment, the dark entity spoke again. The young are always so willing to die for things they do not understand. Must we do this dance? Must we play these roles? Humanity is not the only one suffering in this dreadful place. You and I know how this battle ends. I am beyond death itself. Oh, sure of ourselves, are we? Now, there are more ways to win than killing, Grievous replied with his taunting voice, letting his shield down and walking towards the entity with his sword at hand. The dark entity spoke once again in its deep, sinister, and dark voice. Then, amuse me. How do you plan to prevent progress? I am more than a simple master now. My will end all wars. I don't plan on stopping you. I'm merely doing my part, declared Grievous, taking his sword with a swift movement and stepping forward to stab the dark entity. This created a wound on the center of the monster's chest. Did you genuinely believe this would be enough to stop me? I am the new world, responded the dark entity as it was being impaled, lifted one foot off the ground. Of course not. I know you are an abomination, and it is not my place to defeat you. You defeated yourself when you killed the Trinity. Embarking on this twisted journey of yours was your undoing, remarked Grievous with a smile. Let King Arthur's sword cut through your soul and drag it into hell, yelled Grievous as a sense of valiancy overtook him. Credit nisi stultus, dissimilis autem sapiens, replied the dark entity in pure confidence. With that, the sword began to draw him within. Like a black void, the evil entity no longer stood as a shadow. It was being pulled into the sword itself. The dark entity murmured its last words. Cor tuum mori, from here, It was taken from our world into the next. The knight's heart stopped beating, and at the same time, such an entity vanished. Grievous spoke his last words, in tenebris. Soon after, the great knight fell onto the ground lifeless, overlooking the night sky. The sword took flight, disappearing into the twilight. All that remained were the dead bodies of the fallen and those evil entities that remained witnesses to the events. The night continued to fall into complete silence, and the shadows that lurked in the darkest areas of the forest vanished. The forest took a deep breath, and then the silence broke out into a grieving melody, in perfect harmony with the dancing trees surrounding the meadows. Where a story ends, another begins.